Mary, it's such an honor to get this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. The documentary Mrs. Robinson captures so beautifully you as a person and the causes that you've dedicated yourself to. As the International Land Coalition, we'd like to talk to you about the links between your work and land rights. So firstly, your country's history is so deeply rooted in the struggle for land rights. Speaking for myself, I do what I do as director of the International Land Coalition out of growing up in a rural village in Botswana. What do land rights mean to you personally, and how do they relate to your broader work for social justice?
You're right that coming from Ireland, and actually coming in particular from the west of Ireland and from a small town in the west of Ireland, land rights are extraordinarily important because we learned about the Land League, we learned about John Stuart Parnell and various other wonderful heroes of Irish history. But also I learned from my grandfather, who was a lawyer, and he was taking cases for the tenant against the landlord and then he had to retire because of illness. And he didn't know how to speak to a child, so he treated me as an adult. And I loved that. You know, at the age of 10, 11, 12, to be treated as an adult and talked to about justice. It had a big impression on me.
A key part of your approach to climate justice is creating a platform to amplify the voices of those on the front lines. At ILC2, we are working to shift power to those living on and from the land. How has your experience in influential spaces shaped your approach to shifting power on deep-rooted inequalities, such as land rights?
Well, let me begin by taking the cue from getting the voice to the table, because frankly, people don't give you power, you have to take it. And you have to be there at the table in order to try and do that. And one example that I think illustrates this is, I had been very shocked at my first conference on climate, which was only Copenhagen. I mean, I unlike some people, have not been very long in my life aware of the climate and nature crisis. But when I became aware, I saw it through the lens of justice. So I always talk about climate justice. But when I went to Copenhagen, I was shocked that it was so male, technical, scientific, and not at all about human rights or gender equality or anything. And the following year, with a number of other women leaders, we formed a network of on gender and climate, a network of women leaders on gender and climate, which was women ambassadors or ministers from various countries and heads of UN agencies. And we rather quickly tried to get a reform of focusing on gender. But we realized one of the things that these women could do, because they were the heads of delegations, they were ministers coming to the COP, they decided who'd be in their delegation, was to have grassroots women and indigenous women and young women in as many delegations as possible. And I saw the difference it made. I saw it in Doha. I saw it in just a whole series of COPs. That voice of authority, because you know what you're talking about. You're talking about how your land is affected, your water is affected, your community is affected, and you have chapter and verse. I mean, I heard, so many authentic voices, being so strong on these issues, and I saw the delegates, many of whom were men, literally put down their pen or their pencil and listen with a lot of interest, because they were more concerned about the words in the text, and they fought like mad for this textual approach. And very often, it had little bearing on the actual reality they should have been dealing with. It was a bit abstract, to say the least. And here was this voice of authority, and that's why since then, I've been very keen to get young voices. I've given up panels, or given up actually speaking to media when I get the access. And I said, well, actually, I'd like this young person to step in for me, from time to time. I think anything like that lets people have the access. And they're the ones that should, because they have the authority, they have the legitimacy, they're the voice.
You famously referred to climate change as a man-made problem with a feminist solution, clearly connecting women's rights with climate justice. How do you see women's land rights fitting into that?
Well, of course, it's the absence of women's land rights that we have to start with in so many countries, that women work as farmers, produce the food, but don't own the land. And therefore, don't have the kind of power to change things or do things better that they would often like to do. And with climate shocks and everything else, it can be very difficult. So there is a huge gender dimension to land rights for that reason, right across the board. And again, I think I'm also interested in the way women lead, coming out of the women's movement. And more men are leading like this now. And when I say the way of leading, it's less hierarchical, it's more respectful of everybody's viewpoint, more sharing, more caring, problem solving, and actually thinking that people are differently affected. So we got to take care, to make sure that everybody's included in that way. And we need that kind of problem solving in our world. And we're actually very short of it because there's a dominance at the highest level of male leadership, some of which is very autocratic, some of which is very short-term, populist. And now we see a kind of abuse of power by a certain gentleman, if he is a gentleman at all.
And taking on what you said into your work with Project Dandelion, where you're elevating women-led climate solutions, you often speak about leading from the heart, not just with statistics. Many of the grassroots women in our network place themselves at great risk to defend the land and territorial rights of their families and their communities. What advice would you give these women for sharing their stories in effective and powerful ways?
Well, first of all, I do have some real sense of the genuine risks and the terrible toll. I think I heard a figure yesterday in one of our meetings that for 2023, those protecting their land and water, and men or women, that doesn't matter, environmental rights defenders, 197 were killed last year. I mean, this is, really shocking. And that's killed. You also have families harassed. You have, people imprisoned, maybe their livelihoods taken away from them, whatever, all kinds of problems. So it is brave to put yourself forward. And I think it's necessary to, I honor the courage because it takes courage and needs courage. It does make a difference sometimes if somebody does, stand up and defend their rights and take a case or start a protest or form a group, whatever the activity may be. That takes courage, but it can actually change things because it has disrupted the unfair status quo.
Mary, your work for human rights is really the umbrella for the work that we do in the International Land Coalition for Land Rights. Would you have any message for ILC's members?
I hope that those fighting for land rights, both men and women, will join us in Project Dandelion, because it's a movement of movements. And we want the land rights movement to be part of this movement. And we want a fairer world that is caring. And as you quoted me, we need to move from the heart, and we need a symbol that will inspire us. And the dandelion, which is nature, is the perfect symbol. So I'm very happy to reinforce the importance of the work you do and hope that we can work together.